What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Kicking It with Kachi, powered by the DC Voice. I'm your host, Kasha Analyst, and today, we have the honor of kicking it with chairperson of the ANC, overseeing the great Ward 8, Reverend Wendy Hamilton. Did I get all that
Woo!
correct?
Yeah, close enough.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, thank you. And obviously, for people like myself who butcher these things that they're ignorant about, can you give us some explanation of what the ANC is, what their role is in neighborhood facilitation?
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me first. Let me say that. I
Of
appreciate
course.
it. Um, and yes, I am an advisory neighborhood commissioner. And essentially, what that means for those who don't know, it is an elected office in Washington, D.C., that oversees a specific section of neighborhood within a ward. For those who may not know how Washington, D.C. itself is laid out, the city is made up of 8 different wards containing roughly 90,000 people in each per ward.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, a lot of people don't know that we have over 700,000 residents here in DC. And so each ward, every 10 years, we do a census so that in case one ward might have seen more growth, we redistrict so that we can keep that equilibrium going. We don't want
Mm.
one ward having 200,000 people and another one having 80. You understand what I'm
Right,
saying?
right, right.
So we try to keep, try to level the playing field. So 90,000. So within the wards, there are elected officials that are responsible for that sort of hyper local, hands on, illegal dumping. I got a call uh, earlier this evening from one of my constituents here in Ward 8D. They break it down into sections,
Right.
into the ward and then into certain sections in the ward. So we're in 8D, covers about 9,000 people in our section. And he calls me and he's like, Commissioner Hamilton, they are blocking my parking space in front of my house doing this construction. And I can't, this is inconvenient. And how long is this going to be, happening? And some people might think that seems a little bit mundane,
Right.
but that's not necessary. Those things matter,
Right.
because it it talks about how we live and how we treat our communities and how the services are dispersed across the communities. Because one of the things that we find now, I don't know if you know much about DC folks out there, but Chocolate City is our nickname, right?
Right.
We are a majority Black and Brown city. Those 8 wards that I described, of those 8 wards, 6 of them are west of the Anacostia River, and 2 of them are east of the Anacostia River, wards 7 and 8. And wards 7 and 8 historically have been the most disenfranchised, the most chocolate,
Mm. Mm.
and sees the least amount of equitable services. So we as neighborhood commissioners are the boots on the ground holding these agencies accountable and saying to them, you're over here, inconveniencing our residents. I've got somebody whose car, you're telling them they can't park here,
Right, right.
or you're blocking things, and I can't get you to call me back. But if we were across town, if we were across the river in Ward 3 over by American University, y'all would have sent 2 people out here by now to see what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So
Right.
that's what we do.
Right, right. And when I went to Howard, actually, like coming as a person from New York and going into city, a lot of the things that people told me is don't go to the southeast, don't go to the southwest, and it's this high right crime area. But then, this also paints a fuller picture, right? Like Kwame Ture says, you can't speak about the conditions of the oppressed without also speaking about the oppressor as well. So
Exactly.
like that kind of creates that kind of harked back a little bit of those sentiments when I was in college. And then you saying that created a fuller picture of how a lot of these resources, like you're saying, are
Mhm.
unevenly distributed. So what would you
Exactly.
say are the biggest issues, or what do you say are the pain points of Ward 8 right now, as you're seeing, especially you are overseeing the Bellevue, I believe,
Yeah, the
neighborhood.
Bellevue
So
neighborhood, but
right.
I mean, across the ward, it's economic opportunity and
Hmm.
development. You look out across the city, everywhere you ride west of the river, you're running into a crane where they're, putting up this business. You're running into, like I said, the construction where they're, putting in housing or building up a new business. But over here, the cranes are tearing down
Mm.
housing.
Right.
Over here, the construction workers are blocking parking lots, and
Right.
closing grocery stores. Ward 8, where I am, a commissioner in 8D, 90,000 residents per ward. Remember, I said that?
Right.
We have one grocery store in Ward 8. It's a
Oh,
food desert, one to
wow.
service the entire ward. Whereas across the river in Ward 1, where Howard is,
Right.
14.
Yeah.
14. We have
Wow.
one commercial um, drugstore, CVS, to service the entire ward. They're
Wow.
closing things. It's almost like they're trying to starve us out or something. And I don't
Mhm.
understand how any leader in this city can sleep at night when you recognize the disparities that are happening in the city of Washington, D.C.
Right.
Why are the folks that are the most disadvantaged and at the most risk being serviced the least?
Mhm. Do you live in Ward 8 as well?
The great, yes, I do, and that's
Wow.
and that's what makes it even, it's personal. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Because I want to be able to, stop at the grocery store on my way home and grab some things to eat. We had a CVS, and what was a it was a Rite Aid, then it was Walgreens, and it was a CVS. Ultimately, all of them have closed and moved out of the area, so now we're reliant upon some neighborhood pharmacies. And what I
Wow.
don't like is the narrative became, well, you know, uh, I don't feel safe. There's crime.
Right, right.
So they're using that though, as an excuse to pull out of the community because you're building other places. But let's also talk a little bit about what's driving the crime. Let's talk
Mhm.
about poverty and the lack of economic opportunities that, are here in the ward, and the lack of focus and investment. What you're seeing is the outcome and the, sort of manifestation of years of disinvestment in the
Mhm.
black and brown communities of east of the river, of Ward 7 and
Right.
Ward 8. So what do you expect people to do?
Hmm. And I did some digging as well. You also went to Howard, big HU, right?
You know,
And you crossed in 1990. You were the
correct.
tray of the Alpha Zeta Phi Beta, if I'm not mistaken,
You got that right. Good
of that
research.
line, right? And
That's
in that
correct.
same year, I believe it was that January-ish was the student takeover the A building. Was that experience, myself also in 2020 graduate, we also had our own take over
Yes,
the
we
A building
did.
for some similar situations. And
Mhm.
I know for myself that definitely had an impact on me. But for you, did that kind of drive and still reinvigorate? Did it have something to do with that passion for understand like you are the boots on the ground, but you also are the hands that can create change?
Let me say this to you. I originally came to Howard University back in 19 all right, I'll just put it out there. 1986. I came to Howard University from small town Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know much about HBCUs. They didn't tell us about that. In Ohio, it was always, oh, just go to Ohio State,
Yeah,
stay here
right.
within the state. Don't go out to the big bad city.
Right.
And so that's what I was thinking about doing. But I just so happened my junior year to have a black guidance counselor. She said, well, have you thought about an HBCU? I was like, what's that? And she, like, what you mean? I'm now
Right,
I
right.
had I had heard of Morehouse. I had heard, I think, of Grambling. I think I had
Mm-hmm.
heard of FAMU, but the breadth of my knowledge regarding HBCUs. Now I'm going to say something y'all probably may not remember because y'all are a little younger. Ebony magazine.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. I know. Hey, I'm 25. I know Ebony magazine.
You said you're how old?
I'm 25 now.
You're 25. Like, okay. Ebony, I have shoes older than you. Okay, I'm just kidding. Um, Ebony magazine used to do an HBCU homecoming queen edition
Ah,
where the centerfold would be all these little small pictures of all the HBCU queens across
right,
the country. And I used to open that up and be like, look at these black princesses. We
right,
didn't see
right,
anything. And I would read the names of the colleges under there and just wonder like where they were. That's about what I
right,
knew. And so when she encouraged me to apply to HBCUs and I talked to my mom and she was like, well, wherever you decide to go, it's got to be someplace that I can get to you and help by
right.
car because she didn't fly. And Howard turned out to be the closest.
Enough for her to get the 10-hour drive to
Well,
go
this
over to DC?
it turned out it was only like 6, so that's
Okay,
why
okay.
that was closer than Atlanta was going to be 10 and
Oh,
Florida was
right,
even
right,
further than that. So I came to Howard University sight unseen. I
right,
didn't know what I didn't know what to expect. I was just excited to be going. So you haven't gone to Howard, driving up Georgia Avenue, it didn't look like Ohio.
right.
My mom was like, "Oh, wait a minute now," and it looked even more different when I was there when I got there than when you were there.
Right.
So I said all that to say my entire trajectory, cultural reference point, everything was blown when I
Mhm.
arrived at Howard University. I recognized how much of my culture I had missed out on. I I couldn't believe I was calling friends at home like, y'all, everybody's black. And they're like, what
Yo,
you mean? No, everybody. The
right.
mayor, the police
The
officer, the janitor,
buildings are
my
named after black
professors,
people. It's everything. Yes.
everybody. I had never seen that. I mean, in my town, we had like one black teacher, two black teachers, maybe one black
Right.
doctor.
That
I was
one
like,
black guidance counselor that you had.
yeah, everybody's black. And
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. And so again, what that said to me was, boy, you've missed out. You got to play catch up, and
Yeah.
find out some things. And so I say that first semester, first couple of semesters, I went home for break. I was like Sister Soldier. I was like, yeah, power to the. So when it came time when they did that takeover of the A building that you were talking about, I was like, oh, I'm down. I'm
Oh,
in
you were
there.
there. You were there for the 6 days.
I sure no. I was there for a day and a half because I called my mama and my mama said, "I'm tell you what."
You gonna get? I don't pay for you to get in the bed for no.
She said, "You got one day to feel yourself. Then I need you in class because that's
Right.
what I'm paying for. I'm not paying
Right.
for you."
Right.
But and I knew something historical was happening, right? And
Mhm.
so, and I was there, and I was just glad to be in the mix. I'm just, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm here.
Right.
So that was a great and wonderful experience. So I say that experience, but just going to Howard alone, you already
Mhm.
said it. It changes your mindset. It changes your outlook, and it's all about justice, and it's all about calling out injustice and informing yourself, not just from an emotional place, but from an informed place. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So I ultimately went back to Howard School of Divinity, and got
Mhm.
my, Master of Religious Studies, so I'm, do ministry work as well. But Howard's so nice, I went twice, I tell
Right.
people, but and stayed in the city. One thing I knew is when I got here, I wasn't leaving. I was
I
like,
mean, yeah, two degrees from Howard, 1 degree from Georgetown. You just
I'm
doing the
not.
circuit.
I was like, I'm good. I didn't even want to go home the first summer. I stayed home. I stayed up. My mom was all looking forward to me coming home for the summer. I was like, Mom, I think I'm gonna get a job. I got a job
Wow.
at the National Zoo. And wasn't that going on in Ohio? What I'm going back for?
No, and I have a similar story in me going to Howard. I didn't know anything about HBCUs. I didn't even have the Ebony magazine. My expertise for HBCUs was drumline, and I thought that was fictional.
Are
I
you
thought
serious?
I thought the idea that I thought they just put these black guys and black girls in a school and it was like a low budget movie, like how you watch BET movies. I'm like, oh, this is cool. But
Are you
then
serious?
and then like
Drumline
you,
inspired you to go to Howard. I
uh
love it.
I had a actually it wasn't even drumline because I didn't make the connection with drumline until after I went to Howard.
Got
So
it.
I had like you, I had a black faculty member. He was our assistant principal. And this is like senior year, colleges are coming in and trying to recruit us and talking about their college tours, whatever have you. And he's like, hey, he rounds up all the black, five of us as the black boys in the senior class and says, "Hey, I have someone here from this college. I know you guys are tired of this tourist, but just hear him out. He's a good friend of mine." Turns out it's Morehouse University.
Okay.
And Morehouse is an all boys school. Me at 15 was, or how 17 was not too interested in going to an all boys school. So I
Yep.
did the HBCU research, but again, I'm a teenager. So the first one was Spelman, all girls school, can't go
Yep.
there. And then Howard. I'm like, oh, great. And then I just applied. And then I went, and it was just like you said, whoa. Well, I was like, hold on, your building is named after this black guy. I don't even know who Elaine
Right.
Locke was. I
I
didn't
was
even
looking, it was
know.
like I gotta look these people up, like
Right,
Lula Childers, the
right,
fine
right,
arts and all of that. Because you said
right.
drumline. I wound up ultimately. Let me say this: when I got to Howard, I did lose my mind a little bit because
I
I
mean,
yeah
that's the whole point of being out in the world, yeah.
it was too much freedom. I just my first semester GPA was not pretty.
Right,
But that's because I was just kind of out there, and I was like, what? No curfew, nobody I got
right,
to answer
right.
to. I get out there. So I was at all the parties, clubs, all of that, just trying everything. And so when I came home, I did go home for Christmas break, and my mom said, "Oh, this what we doing?"
Right.
Okay. She's like, "Okay, you got one semester to go back and make that up, or you coming on home to the community college."
Right, right.
So I went back that semester, and I actually joined the band. The
Wow.
marching band, because I had been in band all high school, concert band and
Wow.
all of that.
You was a
And
Showtime.
Showtime? Yes, I was.
Okay.
I was for the
Wow.
for 5 years. Yeah, I was there, and that really cultivated my experience because now I had my people. Now I had my
Right,
tribe. Now I
right.
had my community, and it disciplined me because now I got band practice, and so I got to study. We're
Mhm.
traveling, to the different football games and stuff like that. We'd have sectional practice even after practice, and
Right.
so then I joined the band sorority, Tau Beta Sigma. Kappa Kappa
Wow.
Psi, Tau Beta Sigma. I actually joined that in fall
Wow.
'88 before I joined Zeta Phi Beta in 1990. So
Wow.
I was just like, I want the full Monty.
Right, right. No, that's beautiful. And like, and then coming out of school, right? Like you said, you stayed in DC. You
I
just
did.
you was like, I'm doing this. And then find yourself into the DC public school system. And then was
Yep.
your education, I couldn't find what your bachelor was in. Was it a focus in youth development? Was there a focus in doing that specifically?
Early childhood education and human development
Mm-hmm.
was my
Mm-hmm.
was my undergrad.
And then
Yeah.
oh, just continue. I didn't mean
No,
to
it's
cut you
okay.
off.
So I started out actually working with like Head Start and early
Oh, I
early
love Head
childhood
Start. I work with
learning
Head Start
centers.
now. Nice.
Yeah, so that's how I got that's what I used my degree for ultimately when I first got out. And I worked at a couple of learning centers here in DC. One of them actually
Nice.
was for it was a Department of Energy, had a early
Mhm.
childhood learning center, so I worked there. And so yeah.
No, that's cool. And then I would say then, your position as a former pastor at the Open Metropolitan, let me make sure I got it right.
Open door.
Open Door Metropolitan Community Church, right? And then having these personal facing positions,
Yeah.
how do you think that's affected your ability to be an elected official? Because I believe right now I think we're a lot of us people on the ground are saying it's time we move on from politicians and try to put some people in
Right.
office.
Well, I people a lot. I do a lot of peopling. But that's what I'm so I reached my limit by the time I get home. I was at an event last night, so I gotta go home. I've been peopling all day. but but I've always been an outgoing, friendly, type person. So for me, I felt like, how can I find roles and positions that capitalize on my strengths rather than exploit my weaknesses, right?
Mhm.
And when you understand that about yourself, then you can kind of customize your life experience. So I directed myself toward positions and opportunities. I'm also a Libra. Now, I'm not necessarily all into astrology deep.
Right,
However, I do know that Libras like balance, we like harmony, and we despise injustice. We want the
right,
balance, the scales
right.
balanced. So knowing that that's kind of in my DNA, I've always been someone in work settings, relationship settings, I was always the mediator. I always the one that people would come to and be like, Wendy, work this out. But he said this and I'm saying this, and trying to help people come to a happy medium.
Right.
And so I recognized that that was a gift, a strength of mine. And so then I sought out opportunities that allowed me to flow in that. And
Right.
public service certainly is one of those, as is ministry. Ministry was more of a
Right.
personal call, but you ought to want to be able to relate to people if you're going to go into ministry. And
Right.
so, yeah.
And that's beautiful. Like I was thinking as well. Like one, of course, you'd be the tray because the tray has to kind of start the ripple for the rest of the line. So you really got to make sure in the middle of the line that you're the mediator. But as well, like in being an award of over 9,000 people, right? And then just even me personally, I work with middle schoolers. I have about 25 middle schoolers, and even getting them to agree is a lot. So with the role and responsibility, right, and having that magnitude of being the chairperson and
Mhm,
people calling you personally and saying, "Hey, I need problems, I need fixing."
mhm.
Is there a compromise? How do you kind of allow or, cultivate this harmony amongst so many diverse people?
By first reminding yourself that you're only human,
Mhm.
and that no or I don't know is an acceptable answer. That I don't know, but I'll find the answer for you, or
Right.
I don't know, but I'll connect you with someone who does know. You
Right.
can't take yourself too seriously. You can't, in the sense that, and you can't take things personally. Now, I'm not saying I'm not human and things don't hurt, because some people feel like if you don't have the answer right there, right now, it's like, oh,
Right.
you're
Right.
terrible, you're horrible, you let me down, what, you're useless.
Right.
But you also have to recognize, like for me, okay, that's not about me. The person's just frustrated. You know what I'm saying? I get frustrated too. Um, but how can I give them space to express that frustration while also, um, validating that frustration,
Right.
while also leading them to a place of empowerment. Like, okay,
Mhm.
I get it. I hear. And you said you work for middle schoolers. That's where I work. My day job, because my ministry is part-time that I do,
Right.
and I'm the commissioner work and that, but my day job is in a local DC public middle school,
Mm.
working with uh, attendance and truancy
Right.
counseling. So working with, a lot of our students, who are struggling to come to school, regularly, or on the verge of dropping out, not just because they've given up, but because they've got a lot of post-traumatic stress that
Right.
they're going
Right.
through. They're burying their friends every week.
Right.
Um, Poverty, as I mentioned, housing insecurity, a lot of homelessness, a lot of folks getting evicted in the city. The pandemic really, it did a
Yeah.
number on a lot of people, on a lot of
Right.
places, and you know, they put a lot of stuff on pause during the pandemic, a lot of payments and things like that.
Right.
But, once things got back to normal, it was like, okay, I put it on pause. I didn't cancel it. So now you owe this great big amount. A lady came to me the other day, one of my students' parents came into my office and she said, "We're facing eviction, Miss Hamilton, and I don't know if my, son, he's doesn't want to come to school because he feels like he wants to go to work to try to help us,
Wow.
with this bill."
Wow.
And he's so stressed out because he's the man of the house,
Right.
which is way too much stress for a 14-year-old to be carrying.
Mhm.
But he feels like, he doesn't want to feel like he's not contributing, and he doesn't want to be on the street either.
Right.
But she's $35,000 behind in her rent.
Jesus Christ. Jeez.
It's a lot of money.
Right.
So imagine, hearing that as a commissioner and being someone who's connected to resources, but also understanding that this is just one case. This is just
Right.
one, and even if it seems extreme, everybody in this building, every student, every constituent has a story.
Right.
And you're not going to be able to answer them all. But what I have learned in ministry, what I've learned in life, and what I've learned in public service is that most people just want to be heard. They
Mhm.
don't even want you to fix it necessarily. But if you'll just hear me, if you'll just listen to me, even that will just take a little pressure off. Because everywhere I
Right.
go, trying to talk to somebody, they shut me out, they ignore me, they slam the door in my face or whatever. At least you listened.
Mhm. And that's beautiful. And like I've always me personally, um I'm like I said, I'm very ignorant most of the time of what happens in local offices and how people can get to these things or how the decisions affect me, right? Because I feel
Mhm,
like we are also in a very antitrust of our government era right now.
mhm, mhm,
As we spoke before, a little bit before the interview, a lot of it happening at the federal level, right?
mhm.
Um, and then that power, as you were speaking to, of being on the ground, being an everyday person that also is experiencing these issues and choosing to not only have your own frustrations, but also take people's frustration with you as well to enact change, right? And that kind of got me into, uh, to wonder and to pick your brain about, that campaign for, let me make sure I got the name right, non-voting delegate for Washington, D.C
Yes.
in the
Right.
House of Representatives, right? And
Mhm.
as I was doing my own research about it, I didn't know one why anyone would want to run to be a non-voting delegate, but saw how important it was, right, for an entire city who is almost the size of a mega city, over 1 million people, but doesn't have a vote in Congress, doesn't have a vote in representation, but pay taxes. So walk me through, I guess, like that vigor that is within the city of DC pushing for to be heard.
Again, it is an injustice, and that's
Yeah.
what moves me, right? That you have a city of 700,000 tax-paying residents who have paid more taxes than 33 other states, who have more population than Wyoming and Vermont.
Yeah.
And yet, we have no representation in Congress. We don't have a vote. We don't have a say so. Everything we do in this city has to be run through, has to be signed off on by Congress.
Right.
And that is un American. That's what the whole Boston Tea Party was all about,
Yeah.
taxation without representation.
Right.
And so the non-voting delegate role that they did grant us, the reason why I ran for it, number one, was because even if I couldn't vote, I could use my voice.
Right. Right.
And in that role, you can write legislation, you can sit on committees and
Right.
all of the
Right.
only thing you can't do, I could write a bill, I just couldn't vote for the bill I wrote. You
Hmm.
understand what I'm saying? But
Right.
I still feel like that presence and that visibility of the injustice
Right.
being in front of people on a regular basis is why that role, is important that we have that. And the current delegate who I was running against at the time, icon in the city, done, civil rights and all of that. But I strongly felt I'm very much in support of new energy, new
Right.
ideas,
Right.
new visions. And sometimes in politics we get comfortable with these incumbents and and they feel like it's somewhat entitled to be in the office until they feel like
Right.
leaving.
Right.
and people forget, citizens forget that we are the ones who actually have the power to change that by voting them out. If they're not doing what you think that they're doing, vote them out. And so I
Right.
was hearing a lot of complaining around DC, and I said, well, then run for office or
Yeah. Let's
I'll
do
run
it.
for office. Let's
Yeah.
let's
Let's do
do it.
it.
Okay. Because I really believe she had been in office and still is in office for 32 years.
Oh wow.
She, she's been in that role for 32 years. And so
Wow.
now she's 86 years old. So at some point, DC, we're going to need to think about our next chapter and our next phase. But because she's so revered, people weren't even challenging her. And I said, that's
Right.
not good for democracy. I
Right.
think all incumbents should be challenged because otherwise they'll get comfortable and they'll
Exactly.
start doing the bare minimum because they're like, I ain't got no challenger. Nobody's going to vote me out. And I felt
Right.
like there were people who would be willing to vote against her if they had the option. And so that's what drove me to run was I believe DC residents deserve options on the ballot.
Right.
And so I'll do that.
And that I thought about as I was doing my own research about the because as you illustrated, you didn't win, right? To someone that is obviously was kind of a sure win, quote unquote. And as you know,
Mhm.
like in democracy, that doesn't really make sense when it's supposed to be a vote of the people. But that
Right.
aside, but I thought of the power of losing, right? Especially in situations like that, because you showed people that if you want things to be done, you also have
Yeah.
not only the power but the rights. It's in your American right to run for these offices that has the power to change things. And you showed people that. So
Thank you.
may not have
Well, that
won, but to me, you've definitely showed that to me.
well, here's what's interesting is that we knew it was a long shot. I mean, come on, we knew that,
Right.
which is why we, from the very beginning, defined win very broadly. It was like,
Mm,
do we want to win the race? Sure. But if we can get more young people involved in the process, if we can get more folks educated about why we need statehood, if we can see an increase in turnout, because voter turnout in DC is very, very low,
hmm.
that's a win. You
Right.
understand what I'm saying? And
Right.
so for us, so that's how I processed it. No, I didn't win the actual seat itself, but I won in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Like you said, and I would tell people exactly what you just said because the reaction sometimes when I would tell people I'm running for delegate against Eleanor, are you running against the Eleanor? Are you
Right.
running for Eleanor's seat? I said, with all due respect, it's the people's seat.
Right.
I need you to remember that's your seat. I don't care how long anybody's been in it. That's your seat. And you need to remember that because if the person's not doing what you sent them there to do, you have the power to vote them
To
out.
get him out. Right.
You understand what I'm saying? I said, I'm also running because I can. But guess
Right.
what? So can you.
Right.
So can you. I used to tell people that all the time. This is not some special thing that's set aside for, a certain class of people or, to run for democracy. If you don't like what you see, you yourself can run. That's why I'm
Hmm.
running. I don't, I said, I'm not running against Eleanor. I'm running for DC.
Right. Right. And that's honestly, that's the best way to put it, right? Like if we think of it as these races to for people against people when it should be for the betterment of our communities. So,
Correct.
and to hark back, as I was saying, like when you were in Howard University, you had the legendary. I think there was one primary a little bit before that. I think there was one more before that. But you had the legendary, a building setting that inspired the one that happened in my,
Yeah.
collegiate time. Um, and I'm pretty sure when you were in DC, you've also saw that on the news and had your own feelings about it. But then what is your call to action for young people to get involved in politics or in public office or even just, in making change in their community?
Just my call to young people is just understanding that you can, that you don't have to have connections. You don't have to have a pedigree. You don't have to have millions of dollars. Does money help? Sure, it does. But all you need is passion and a desire to see something different. And remember that you are the catalyst for that. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You don't have to wait till all your ducks are in a row. Look at some of the younger people who are taking office now. There's one in particular, Maxwell Frost. He is the youngest member of Congress. He's from out of Florida, but
Hmm.
he won in 2022 at 24 years old,
Oh
25 years
wow.
old. Maxwell Frost is amazing. And he used to help out in his community. That's the other thing I say. Whatever you're seeing in your community that bothers you the most, that is probably where you need to get involved. People say,
Hmm.
well, I'm not sure what I wanted to do. I'm not sure what I want to support. Well, what pisses you off when it's not done? Or what injustice, what thing just makes you, keeps you up at night, that bothers you when you see it. That's
Right.
that's the spot. That's where you need to
Right.
be, because it's keeping you up for a reason. It's bothering you on a visceral level for a reason. Other people can walk by it, see it all the time, and it doesn't bother them. But for you, it sticks with you for a reason.
Mhm.
So figure out what that thing is and plug in right there and start there. And then what you will find is, once you take that initial step into getting involved on a very local and run for local office,
Mhm.
dog catcher, board of education, that's really where I think we forget that the magic happens. It- the mayor, the school board, they have more impact and influence over your direct life than the president of the United States. It's
Right,
the
right.
decisions that are made right there that are going to make the difference, not what Joe Biden and Kamala are doing. That stuff is high tier. But look at some of the judges, in your community, and some of
Mhm.
the sentencing laws and things like that they're passing. All politics are local, and that's what I encourage young people to do. No office is too small, and no office is too insignificant. All of them matter. Look at what's happening around the country with these book bans, or these attempts to
Right,
erase Black history. You
right.
got regular everyday mothers who are running for the school board and getting on there and then trying to, impact policy. I saw a story about, the number of books I think that have been banned in Florida to this point, and they traced it back to one person,
That
one
got elected.
singular
Wow.
person, that it's not even, it's a citizen. They're not even in office. But
Wow.
she is the one, she's on this crusade going through books, and then she shows up at council and says, look at this book and look what's in there. And that
Wow.
person has been solely responsible for a large percentage of the books that have been banned in that state. So all I'm saying is politics starts, from the bottom up, not from the top down. And so if there's somewhere that you feel like you can lend your voice, your energy, your time, your talent, do that. And remember, it's not just about the title, it's about the work.
Mm. You have a lot of good taglines. You done them good. But that's great, honestly, to know, and and to share as well, because like I said, I believe that especially my generation that was hit with the pause student loans and all this, that,
Mhm.
and the third, and then this antitrust of government, and also having the highest voter turnout of, in the last 20 years, 30 years, and it
Right.
being this generation, but then feeling a lot of our, you know, complaints and frustrations that keep us up at night are not being met at the federal level, we can get up out of
Yes.
that bed
So
and
go
get to
meet
the
them.
local work.
Right.
Yeah.
If you don't trust it's not that you don't trust the people who are
Don't
are
trust the people
handling
in the
government.
government.
Right.
Right.
So then you go
Exactly.
get in it. Then you
Exactly.
vote them out and you go get in.
Right. The same way how in 1990 you guys ain't like what was going on with Howard, y'all took over the A building. Same way as we did. We was like, we taking
Yeah.
over because y'all did. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
to go on a more positive note before we head out of here,
Yep.
speak to me about some of your favorite things about Ward 8.
The well, I there's so many. I think one of the best things I like about Ward 8 is that it still has that community feel,
Right.
right? There Big Mama's daycare is still up the hill. You
Oh,
see what I'm
wow.
saying? And the Georgina's lounge up the street, where you can go
Wow.
get you some the soul food is on point. And everybody kind of knows everybody, and it still feels sort of like its own small town, its own entity. There's still this sense of we all we got over here,
Right.
in Ward 8. So we're very, very proud of the ward, and we recognize, like you were saying, you were told don't go to Southeast, don't go.
Right. Right.
Only people who are saying that who are people who haven't been over here. When you come over
Exactly.
here, it's a totally different story. It's like, oh, this is like my neighborhood around the way. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Exactly. Right.
And so, us trying to tell that story, but trying to maintain what the best thing I think about it now is it still maintains the essence of Chocolate City. Now I said
Mhm.
DC is Chocolate City, but the truth of the matter is it's changing quite rapidly,
Yeah.
honestly. And the last census that we did, the population demographics was 46, 46.
Wow.
So,
Looking
in
a
the next
little, looking a little like a moon cake, not really like a chocolate city no
instead of
more.
mooncake, I'm dead. A mocha latte. So one of the things that Ward 8 is doing is preserving
Mhm.
that essence of that made Washington D.C. Washington D.C. And I like that.
And that's beautiful. And that's beautiful. And thank you, Reverend Wendy Hamilton.
Oh,
I just took my time. I didn't even realize we was over here talking for
yep,
over an hour now. Oh my God. Jesus
yep.
Louise. But
Well, thank you.
I mean, I think when you get they always say when you get two Howard people in a bar, you gotta see who's gonna close first, the conversation or the bar. So
Oh, I love that. Well,
so
thank
I'm
you. I
glad
really
that
appreciate you taking the time to
of
meet with,
course.
interview me. Hope it was helpful. I know it's not probably your usual type of interview, so I appreciate you letting me come on and chop it up a little bit.
I know, and I love it. And like I said, I think this has both emboldened me to get to know my local representatives as well, and get to know them
Hmm.
as people, as I did with you, and get to know what their pressure points are, and see how we can collaboratively come to solutions like you do in Ward 8. So thank you for being the model and being the not only the model but the trailblazer in a lot of those things when it comes to reform and community cultivation. So thank you for all that you're doing.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Bison. Blessings to you.
Thank you, thank you, thank
Take
you.
care.
Of course, of course. And you guys can check out this interview at the DC Voice on our Instagram and YouTube page as well as the DCVoice.com. Once again, I'm Costa Analyst, Reverend, sorry, my mush mouth, Reverend Wendy Hamilton. You guys can check her out in Ward 8 or all around the DC area. If you guys can catch her, you're lucky enough. She's an amazing, amazing individual. Make sure you check in with your local ANC commissioners as well. If you're not in Ward 8, if you're Ward 8, you know who to call is Wendy Hamilton. Once again, thank you, thank you, thank you for kicking with me.
Thank you. Take care.
You as well.
All right.